So, welcome everyone. Welcome to the next in our series of conversations with mums. And I'm so happy to be chatting today with Allison Parks Dugas, who is my good friend and colleague. And we're going to be talking about what it's like to be in the sandwich generation. So, to be caring for our young families or older families and teens, and also for our aging parents. And as well as that, we're going to dip our toes into the world of being an empty nester because Allison's just exploring that territory now with two sons at college. And it's, as always in these conversations, just how yoga can help us navigate all the different stages of life. So Allison and I are both directors of two of the directors of Yoga Life Institute of New Hampshire teacher training. So we provide teacher training to people who want to start their experience and journey as being yoga teachers. We've known each other for many years. Allison's an amazing yoga teacher and she's very committed to yoga, integrates it into her whole life, and that really shines through in her teaching too. She lives in Exeter, New Hampshire, same as me. She has two sons who are both at college, and she's been managing her mother's care for quite some time. She also managed her father's end of life. He passed away a few years ago, and is, I would say, an expert at juggling the different parts of motherhood and caring for family members. She's like me, a yoga lifer. We both practice classical yoga, comes from the same lineage, traces its way back through the Yoga Life Institute in Pennsylvania, all the way to the Yoga Institute in Mumbai, India, which is the oldest yoga center in the world. So, welcome, Allison. So happy that we're going to be having this conversation. Thank you for your time. I thought it might be nice to let the audience get to know you a little bit. Maybe you could introduce yourself, talk about how you got into yoga, what attracted you, and what keeps you practicing all this time later.
Hi, Alice. Thanks. Thanks. That was a nice intro. Yes, my name is Allison Parks Dugas, as Alice pointed out. I have many roles in my life, many hats that I wear, and I jokingly say that I'm a Jill of all trades, a master of none. Um, but what attracted me to yoga, well, I was first introduced to yoga in my 20s, and it was really the physical practice that brought me to yoga. I think many people, especially here in the United States, equate yoga with the asana, the postures and poses that we do there on our mats. And coming from a background in gymnastics, as a child, I did competitive gymnastics as well as figure skating. I found the physical practice to be really, it came natural to me. I had strength, I had flexibility. So getting into a lot of the postures and poses, and even ones that are challenging, seemed was a challenge, but at the same time, it was is very natural to me. And linking that movement to breath was really powerful, not something I learned per se in gymnastics or figure skating. So it really felt like a meditation in motion to me. And I started off with a really vigorous practice. That was what I was introduced to. A friend of mine invited me to come to a class with her in my 20s, and I went to it. I was exhausted after it, but I also felt really grounded and at peace. I know those endorphins were rushing, so I felt that yoga glow that many people speak of after they practice. And I kind of knew I found something special, like it sort of complemented all of the other things that I'd done physically. And it opened something else up in me, but I didn't quite know what that was. I continued to practice yoga for several years, for multiple times a week. And it really wasn't until my 30s when I had a lot of larger life transitions between getting married, having two small children. I left a teaching job, elementary school teacher, teaching job. I started some new work that was different and new to me. Um, and I knew that I needed something different than necessarily a vigorous practice. I actually felt like I needed something that down-regulated me more, and made me feel more at peace. Not that the vigorous practice didn't, but I felt like more like I needed that meditative aspect of it. You know, and also I needed something for my own self-care. Um, beyond the physical, so the mental, emotional, even spiritual components that I think a yoga practice can offer you. So that's how I started. And it was really on a playground that I ran into my teacher, who I took my classical yoga teacher training with. It was on a playground, and I just started to talk to her about yoga. And before I knew it, I signed up for the training program. And my youngest was, I think, 18 months old, and my oldest was almost 3.5. At that point, it gave me a reason to get out of the house one weekend a month and have it just be all about what I was interested in. So that's a little bit about what got me started in yoga. And I think what I learned in my teacher training program, that I learned classical yoga, like I mentioned, and that teaches the eight-limbed path of yoga, which is mentioned in the Yoga Sutras, an ancient yogic text. And the beauty of it is that asana is just one limb of this eight-limbed path. So I learned so much more about what yoga truly is. And I think those pieces, along with the asana being one of the limbs, is what is really what has gotten me to continue to practice and want to teach it, because it gave me a lot of tools that I could bring into my day-to-day living to manage the things that I wasn't managing as well, with all those new life transitions that were going on for me. So uh, that I think is what has kept me teaching, both not only in my studio classes but also in the teacher training program. Eventually, I ended up with you and another colleague of ours taking over the teacher training program that I got trained in. So you could see how impactful that was on my life. So it feels like it was a gift that I received that I wanted to continue to share with others.
It's so interesting to hear you share that. I think we find that a lot, don't we? That people start with the physical practice and they want to learn more and more and go deeper and deeper. And that's often when they sort of approach us about doing teacher training, because there's something in them. It's something in the practice that calls you.
Mm.
You eat when you're practicing the physical, there's that sense that there is something more there. And so many of us, I think, find our way into the deeper practices from there. So thank you for sharing. Um, you also mentioned that it continuing to practice allows you to deal with things with more grace than perhaps you would have done otherwise, and that's what keeps you practicing. Could you give us a few examples from your life about how yoga maybe helps you stay more, um, well, move through those things with more grace?
One of the things that comes to mind is my role as a mother, seeing that we're talking about mothering here a little bit too. Um, and I do have two sons. And um, early on, when I was going through the training program, I realized that I realized that I was struggling. One story comes to mind. One story comes to mind, and that is when my sons were both young, probably around the time that I started the training program, so similar ages that I mentioned. They were inevitably like eating at the table, throwing food on the floor. The food was just falling all over the floor, and it was a messy all over the floor and the countertop, and I found myself on my hands and knees cleaning up their mess. And in my head, I was complaining to myself, saying, like, I have a master's degree, and here I am on my hands and knees cleaning up this mess. And I wanted kids. This is something I wanted. I wanted to have a family. But one of my teachers during the teacher training program, I shared this little antidote with them and said, I didn't know how to like I don't want to feel this way about mothering or parenting or at this time in my life. And I didn't like it, but I didn't quite to know how to get out of my own head, so to speak. Um, and this teacher reminded me of in classical yogas, there's the five branches of yoga. And so they're up on the same tree, but there's many branches. And or you can think of it as a mountain, right? We're all trying to reach that peak of the mountain, a state of peace and grace and connection. And there are many different trails to get to the peak of that mountain. So that's how I think of the five branches in some ways, is they're the same mountain or the same tree. They're just five different paths or ways or branches. And basically, my teacher told me I was coming at the role of parenting from a different branch, and I needed to shift over to another branch. And that branch was karma yoga, the yoga of selfless service. And I was coming at it from, my time teaching and studying, which is jnana yoga, which is the yoga of the intellect, using your mind. And getting down on your hands and knees, you don't really need to use your mind. You need to do selfless service. So once I had that shared with me, that realization helped me shift my perspective and focus on the priorities of karma yoga, which is basically to take care of myself first. So maybe my complaining might be that I'm not caring for myself first enough to then be able to be in that role of mother and care for others. So, in karma yoga, they say, take care of yourself first, your priority number one. Sounds selfish, right? But you think of just the same as when we get on an airplane, put on your oxygen mask first before you put on someone else's and help someone else, because you will be useless to them if you don't take care of yourself. Same with the saying of fill your well, right? If my well runs dry, there's nothing left there for me to give out to others. So really a great reminder to prioritize yourself first and care for yourself, that self-care. And there's other things in karma yoga that I learned that helped me. And one of the first ones was just accept the task at hand. So when I'm complaining, there's resistance there. I'm not accepting what is. I'm not accepting reality as it is. And that creates suffering. So accepting the task at hand was another thing that I had to really learn to. That was, I think, one of my biggest intentions that I set during the teacher training was acceptance was my intention. So that I could go on and on about karma yoga, but I think many of the aspects of the philosophy have been immensely helpful as I've had to navigate life and parenting and challenges off of my mat.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that, Alison. I think at its essence, yoga is state of mind training, and it's like how we manage our minds so we essentially cause ourselves less suffering. And I think that really applies to mothering, but I
Mhm.
think it's still not as understood as it could be in the wider population, that yoga has that potential to really transform our stress at its root by changing our perspective about the things that we are going about our lives doing. So
Right.
I love that example of the realities of looking after small children and how that mindset shift can really make all the difference.
Yes, for sure.
So I know that you are a recent empty nester this academic year. Your youngest went off to college. How are you doing with that transition? And how's yoga helping you with it?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think, I'm still figuring out the new normal. Like I said, I have many other roles that I fulfill or hats that I wear, and so I've been able to focus on those things. But I think, the distance is the hardest part, not being there when they're having difficulties or when they're not feeling well or they're having a down day, and I just want to check in on them. I think I think that's probably the hardest part. I can say that the easiest thing, or the thing that I've noticed, is that the floor stays much cleaner, or the house is much cleaner in the
Yeah.
empty nest. But, I think that, again, yoga is all about awareness, and the yoga philosophy helps guide me. And sometimes when I'm facing what we call in yoga, like the hindrances of the mind, which are called kleshas, which often bring us suffering and make us feel really disconnected. When when I start going down a path of suffering, or I feel like I'm creating my own suffering, or I'm feeling challenged in some way, I usually hold up my hand and try to remind myself which of the five kleshas, which of these hindrances of the mind is rearing its head. And just that simple awareness can be really helpful in shifting out of that headspace. Um, Now, the audience doesn't know what maybe the kleshas are, but their ignorance, and it's not an ignorance of like you're not intelligent or smart or um, learned. It's more of a forgetfulness of your true nature. Um, which means then what we do, we identify with our ego self. So egoism is the second one. The ego has pleasures it wants to fulfill, so we form attachments and to things that bring us pleasure. And anything that gets in the way of our pleasures, we form aversions to. That's the fourth one. And last but not least, there's the fear of change, fear of loss, the ultimate one being a death. So I can identify just with my kids going off to school and empty nesting that I have attachments to my children. And that is a challenge, to let them go and try to support them in the best way that I can and not feel like I'm the one that needs to be in control. And also, there's some fear there. There's that fear of loss, like, am I ever going to, what kind of role am I going to play in their lives? Or, so there's a lot of unknowns there. But again, sometimes that simple awareness of just identifying what's coming up for me helps me then shift. And I ask myself, what is it that I want to feel in this moment? I want to feel um confident that my kids are embarking on their lives. I want to feel confident in my next steps of what I am doing. So then maybe it's confidence that I need to set as my intention for my practice, or maybe it's something else. Sometimes, like I said, that simple awareness of what's creating the suffering can then shed light on how I truly want to feel. It's usually the opposite, which brings me to another practice of yoga. I could go on, but like Pratipaksha Bhavanam, which is, when negative thoughts arise, practice the opposite. It sounds so simple, but to actually put it into practice is the challenging thing. But it gets us to at least shift in that direction towards a more positive outlook or outcome. And if we're not, fully capable of practicing the opposite in that moment, or if I'm not fully capable of doing it in that moment, sometimes it's just that realization, and it gives me a path that I can move towards.
Yeah. It all starts with awareness, as you say.
Hmm.
And from there, we have some choices, even if they're choices we can't actually put into effect right at that moment. And in
Right,
fact, we might need to circle back to it.
right.
What shifts are you seeing in your mothering now the kids are at college? Like in the way, obviously, you've talked a lot about the internal experience. Now the kids have sort of taken that big step towards independence.
Hmm.
How do you think it's manifesting on the outside in your parenting, like from the kids' perspective?
Well, I think I play a more supportive role in their lives. Rather than mothering on a daily basis, reminding them to pick up their things or put away their things, or have them get down on their hands and knees and clean up the floor, rather than me. I find myself sort of trying to be a little bit more of a coach or like a mentor. Even in just a reminder of things, sort of like trying to remind them of what's there. So again, I think my tendency is to want to offer advice. I go there because that's the mother in me that wants to do that, but um I try to again have it be more like from a coaching type perspective. So, offering advice when I'm asked for it. Which instead I try to ask questions. My husband's really good at it, and I'm working on it more and more. Moving from telling instead of telling, asking. So offering advice when I'm asked. Um, Reminding them so as a reminder, I try to remind them to, try and find equilibrium in their days, like asking them how they're prioritizing their self-care and what are they doing for fun and how is it like, what does their life look like? So letting them kind of share more than me, telling them. You know, as this has been for us, the next stepping stone for them has been college. It isn't for all children, but what we realize is that this is a gradual release of responsibility onto them of taking ownership into becoming more independent. And, let's be honest and realistic. Like they still get their meals made, but they are navigating, responsibilities of managing their laundry and managing themselves and their time, with plenty of supports in place from both me and my husband, as well as with the school. Like a lot of these schools, more so than when I went to school, it seems like there's just so much more supports in place to help students make that transition, that big life transition of becoming more independent. So, yoga's helped me in asking questions rather than just spouting off what I think, as I'm tempted to do. And just like when I get onto my map, I try to listen to myself. I try to give myself space and become, come into the present moment so that I can let my inner wisdom come through. I'm trying to have them tap into their inner wisdom and let that guide them. Um, so I just try to do the same with them.
Yeah, no, that's lovely. But it definitely challenges us motherhood, doesn't it? To keep learning and keep pivoting. Like you can, like from when the moment you get pregnant, really, or you adopt a baby, you are change in that process of change, aren't you? It's like you think you've got it down, and then
Mm-hmm.
something shifts. Um,
Yes,
and I think,
that's the one constant to remind yourself that the one constant is change.
yeah,
Right when you think you've got it all figured out, things change. And you have to be nimble enough and flexible enough and uh, willing to just kind of go with the flow.
yeah,
You're not the one 100% in control.
no,
I think that's the humbling thing about motherhood, it it's not it's not all about you anymore.
indeed. And what I love, one of the many things I love about yoga is the fact it does remind us that everything in the material world is changing and it's
Absolutely.
normal. And and when we hold on and try and stop things changing, that's when we really suffer. So, uh,
Yeah, that's our attachments there, right?
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, just that simple reminder that all things are changing
yeah.
can really just again, it's that perspective taking, right? It's just being aware, just becoming more aware.
And it's
Like,
so
oh,
powerful and helpful, I think, that statement when things are really tough. Like, because we all have times when, we're very worried about our kids or, something's going on with us or someone else in the family where things are tough and we might not feel like we're coping or that it's really hard. But I think sometimes that perspective can be a gift in itself, can't it? Like,
mm,
okay, this too will pass.
mhm.
We have to hold it and manage it, but we don't have to, we're not going to be sitting with it forever.
Right, right, absolutely, absolutely. And it's hard. It's hard in that moment sometimes to see that. And I think that's why reminders are really helpful. Like these little sayings, like all things are changing. If you have it like a little mantra and you repeat it to yourself, especially when you notice, when you're aware, when you become more aware, which yoga gives us that opportunity to do that on our mats, that gives us that time, that spaciousness, that presence to be able to see what bubbles up for us and become more aware.
So let's expand the lens a little bit and talk about that sandwich generation element. So I know this probably for you started probably 5, 6 years ago, maybe even I can't remember the exact time frame, but there's been a long, quite a protracted period of time that you've been raising your family whilst really carrying the burden of the care for your aging parents.
Mm.
Um, what would you say has been the major challenges with that, and any insights into how yoga has helped support you? And if there's any positives that you can identify too, that would be great to hear.
The sandwich generation is tough, I have to be honest. You're full, I feel or have felt pulled in many different directions. And I think the thing that yoga practices have provided for me is that self-care. And I think it's crucial in being in any caregiver role that you are prioritizing your self-care. Again, like I said earlier, like putting on your oxygen mask or filling your well. It's if you're not doing that, you're going to burn out and feel very overwhelmed. And that I'm speaking from experience here. And it sometimes it takes that to remind yourself, sometimes it takes a little burnout or a little bit of overwhelm to be like, oh, wait a minute, I'm out of whack here. I'm a little out of balance, and no matter how much all these other people need me, I need to make sure that I'm taking care of myself so that I can continue to be there for them. So, like I said earlier, my yoga practice helps make me feel grounded, makes me feel more connected um, to that inner wisdom within me, to my higher self, as we would say in yoga, rather than my ego self, which again is that, I feel a sense of peace and connection and contentment when I move through the world from that place rather than my ego self. So, and also teaching yoga brings me back to the teachings I've learned about and I continue to share with others. So it remains fresh. It remains fresh in my mind. So I live it more off my mat.
And, sometimes we have to hold different emotions, don't we, when we're going through difficult times. So sometimes, I think the sandwich generation, you're balancing some of the joy of child rearing with some of the sadness of like aging parents. There's a lot emotionally to process there, as well as like juggling all of the different elements of that. Uh,
Yeah.
and I agree, yoga is a great way for keeping us kind of connected and more stable in all of that.
But
Uh,
at the same time, I think, yeah, absolutely. I think allowing yourself to feel whatever it is you feel, I think is valid. Um, I always try to remind my students to let go of any sort of criticism or judgment of whatever comes up for them on their mats, and I try to live that as well. Um, because uh, I think the more that you can acknowledge where you're at and offer yourself some self-compassion, you know, the more comforted you'll feel and the more you'll be able to move forward from a place of um, feeling more balanced and at ease. So yeah, I think there's a lot of challenges. It's not easy, but be kind to yourself
yeah.
and acknowledge that it's not easy. And yeah, just taking all those lessons that you learned from yoga and keep prioritizing your self-care.
And self-care is so important. And in yoga, we actually look at it as a responsibility. Our primary duty is to take care of ourselves so we can be of service, as you touched on before.
Yeah.
But I know when I talk to people, especially if they are in an like extremely challenging situation, um, they can feel it can actually just feel like one more set of things to do. It's like I don't have time for my self-care, and then they feel guilty about not taking care of themselves, and that becomes another burden as opposed to a way of lightening the load. Um, and I liked what you said about being kind to yourself.
Mm.
Self-care can be as small or as large as we want it to be. Like
Hmm.
it can be a moment of breath, can't it? It can be a moment of kindness, can be a moment of connecting with what you're feeling and acknowledging it. It doesn't have to be an hour's yoga practice, although obviously if you can do that, that's going to be hugely supportive. But
Right, right. Exactly. I mean, self-care could be saying no to something that you really would like to do, but your time doesn't offer, or saying like, I think of this, one example comes to mind when I would volunteer in my kids' classrooms, um, when I could. I would go in and I would volunteer once or twice a month. And then some months, they would ask for a volunteer. The teacher would send an email and say, "Oh, do we have any parent volunteers?" And I said, "You know what? I went last time, or I went this year already. I'm going to leave that open to some other parent, give them an opportunity." And not feel any sort of guilt that I'm not being there for my kids or that I'm not volunteering enough. Um, so I guess it's sometimes it's saying no to things
yeah.
is a definitely a form of self-care. Even if it's something you want to do, oh, I really would like to volunteer, but my plate is full, and what can I shave off my plate or scrape off my plate a little bit to feel a little more spacious and maybe it is saying no to some of those things that you would like to do, but you know, it just seems like too much.
And that's, I think, where we come back to awareness again. Like, what feelings does that generate? Lots of people we work with, they don't feel comfortable saying no to people. It generates guilt and feelings of, discomfort. So being aware of that and then practicing saying no and not feel and practicing being okay with that and cultivating ease around it can be really powerful, but it can be a practice. It can take time. So, to get comfortable. But it all starts, doesn't it, with knowing when we're out of balance and then deciding like if
Yes,
there's a better way to move forward. So,
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, for sure.
so Alison, thank you so much for all your wisdom. It's always lovely chatting to you. It would be if people wanted to connect with you, work with you, come to take a class with you, you know, sign up for teacher training with you, us. How could they get in contact? What's the best way?
Oh yeah, I think the best way would be at Mill Yoga. Mill Yoga in Exeter, New Hampshire is where I teach some studio classes. It's what's great, I think, about what we do at Mill Yoga is not only do we offer classes that are in person, but we still live stream our classes. So if someone wanted to tune in from home or they're on vacation and they wanted to take their yoga with them, they can tune in right from their device, their phone, their tablet, their computer, laptop, and take the class live stream, or they receive a recording of the class that lasts for a few days, I guess.
Seven, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, about a week.
Yeah.
So they can then, take the class whenever is convenient to them. So I find that a lot of people take advantage of that, and I think it's a great way to stay connected with our community and broaden our community. So yeah, Mill Yoga is one of the places that I'd recommend, and also the Yoga Life Institute of New Hampshire Teacher Training Program that we run is housed at Mill Yoga. So teacher trainings run from September to May, usually each year, or September to June, the beginning of June, depending on how it falls. But it's 10 months, one weekend a month. And you can find out more at yogalifeteach.com.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for coming and talking to me today, Alison. It's been lovely. Thanks for being so open and vulnerable. I think it's so important that we talk about some of the ways that parenting and looking after loved ones is challenging and how there are tools out there to help us navigate things more easily. And also that we're not alone. And this is a normal part of experience. And really, if we can find ways of being in community with other mums and talking about these things, it's going to be nourishing for all of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Alice, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
Alison. Take care.